In 2018, Congress asked the Secretary of Defense to develop a preference for using other transactions and procurement for experimental purposes, and mandated training and education. Since this is what the Strategic Institute does, we know that this hasn't happened in any significant way. Why do you think that is?
That National Defense Authorization Act, which amended 10 U.S.C. 2371 in subsection G to have the education mandate, as well as the preference for using 2371, 2371B, and procurement for experimental purposes under Section 2373, was a very clear endorsement by Congress for the use and education in these authorities. So why hasn't the department stepped up to this? Why haven't they embraced this? A lot of it has to do with the ingrained bureaucracy. The Federal Acquisition Regulation system, the FAR system, is so deeply ingrained in the bureaucracy that there are senior people who have risen up in the ranks of the bureaucracy for decades, who are in senior positions, that can't imagine that the department really needs to embrace an alternative to the FAR system. In fact, they have even ignored the directions that exist in the Federal Acquisition Regulation. Federal Acquisition Regulation Part 35, dealing with research and development, says that the purpose of contracted research and development is the acquisition of knowledge and the application of that knowledge to address agency and national goals. That's the policy. FAR 35.003 says that procurement contracts will be used only when the principal purpose of the transaction is the acquisition of goods and services. So we have the juxtaposition between the acquisition of knowledge and the acquisition of goods and services. The entire science and technology array of projects that the Department of Defense enters into could be executed with other transactions. And yet the department bureaucracy is so wedded to the FAR system that they continues to use procurement contracts whose principal purpose is the acquisition of goods and services, not the acquisition of knowledge, for that purpose. This is just a matter of inertia and momentum and not wanting to accept new ways of doing business. It exists in the workforce, but it also exists in the mind of leadership. People who say, well, why would I want to do something different? They don't understand the power of OTs. They don't understand the need for flexibility in that array. Well, part of the reason they don't understand the power of OTs and they don't understand the need to change is because they haven't been educated and they haven't been exposed to what OTs have done in the past as far as forming relationships between parties that optimize the way a project can be executed by forming a government team of subject matter experts with varied backgrounds, rather than just having a resource sponsor come up with some sort of a requirement, which goes into the contracting process, which churns through, which sends it up to legal for a legal review. We ask the comptroller that we've got the right kind of money. All that is done in serial, as opposed to doing things the way OTs are optimized, which is putting a team together to execute projects, to having a common vision within the government of what the goals of the program are, and then engaging industry at a very early stage to get industry inputs into this. It's a different way of doing business, and unfortunately, there are a lot of folks in the Department of Defense who are so set in their ways that they're not prepared to embrace a new way of doing business. Senior leadership has a lot of issues to address. They don't go through every National Defense Authorization Act and see all the things that Congress has put on DoD's plate to execute. They rely upon their staff to do that. And in the case of other transaction, the cognizant staff is, of course, the bureaucracy that are experts in the FAR and 5000 system, and who doesn't really believe that OTs are needed, and doesn't even read closely FAR Part 35, which says that they ought to be using an instrument other than a procurement contract to execute science and technology programs. And in many cases, they've never even heard of 10 U.S.C. 2373, procurement for experimental purposes. So I would say that senior leadership in the department has been seriously let down by the bureaucracy, the offices the staff offices that they rely upon to respond to directions from Congress. There's just a disconnect between the information that the leaders need to have in order to execute faithfully the mandates that they have been given by Congress. I'm sorry to see it, but I mean, your statement is true. The department has fallen down in the area of education, and the area of educating the workforce is a key to getting effective use out of the legal authorities of other transactions that Congress has given to the department to overcome the cost too much, takes too long traditional system that we've been wallowing in. And, people criticize it, the Section 809 panel. Many other commissions going all the way back to the Commission on Government Procurement in 1972. We have this overregulated system that's burdened with costs that add very little value, if any, to the system, that burden our contractors with business practices that people in the commercial world just wouldn't accept. The solution is there by following the mandates of Congress, and the department just hasn't stepped up. And as I said, I think it's a failure of key staff offices that ought to be going to their leadership and saying, Congress told us to do this, give us the resources and the human capital to allow us to do this.
Thank you, Rick. They can find you and your expertise if they visit our website at strategicinstitute.org.